Welcome to Your Brain and Learning Vocabulary. The English language has about 500,000 words in it. That's a lot of words, but the good news is that most native speakers only know about 25,000 of those words, and we only actually use about 5,000 in our daily lives. So that's still a lot of vocabulary to learn if English is not your first language. But it's doable. So how do you get started? Well, a lot of words that you already know are pretty easy to learn. Words like apple or dog, for example. These are concrete nouns and they have direct translations in your own languages. There's a word in Spanish for dog. There's a word in French for apple, and in Chinese and in Korean. So these are pretty easy to learn. There's a set of other words, however, that are more difficult. Words that refer to ideas, for example, or processes, or relationships between ideas. These are all abstract words, and they often don't have a direct translation into your own language, so they're a lot more difficult to learn. They're important, however. They're important because in your university classroom, you need to be able to talk about ideas and relationships between ideas. So how do you go about this? Let's take a look first at how human memory works. And let's get an overview of these three types of memory. The first type of memory is sensory memory. This is where you hold images and sounds that you've just heard. Nothing stays there for very long. Working memory is what you're using when you think. You're using your working memory right now to pay attention to this video, to figure out why it's important and how you might use this information. The working memory can hold a little bit of information in it as memory, but it mostly processes things. It figures out problems. An important thing to know about working memory is that it is very limited. So when you are working on a difficult problem and another problem comes along or somebody tries to talk to you, you can't do all of those things at once. This is because your working memory is limited. The third type of memory is long-term memory. Your long-term memory is unlimited. It's kind of like a storage cabinet or a filing drawer or a huge garage where you hold memories from your childhood, stories about your life, things that happened in the past. It's also where you have all of your knowledge, things that you've learned, ideas that you've thought about. A lot of these things are associated with being really happy or really sad or really angry. But you're not thinking about all of these things right now. They're not in your working memory. They're in your long-term memory. You can call on them when you need them. Your first language is also in your working memory, in your long-term memory, excuse me. So you use your long-term memory to help the working memory do the work that it needs to do. For example, if you are trying to understand American football, that's what your working memory is working on right now. You probably will use your knowledge of basketball or soccer or other sports in order to help you understand the patterns that you're seeing in American football. This is how long-term memory helps our working memory. And then when our working memory makes sense of something, it creates a new memory and puts that into long-term memory. When you learn vocabulary or anything new for that matter, your goal is to create strong, long-term memories that you can call on when you need them. So let's take a look at what this looks like in a classroom. These are 4 students. They're all ESL students, and they're all in the same design class. They're all encountering the same new word in that class that the teacher keeps using. The word is element. Let's see how each student approaches this challenge. This is Joey. Joey is paying attention to his computer. He's actually playing a game, and he's chatting with friends on his computer. You'll notice that his working memory is completely full of the game and the chat. There is no room for anything else. So when the instructor is talking, Joey can't learn anything because the emotion just bounces right off of him. Alice, on the other hand, Alice is paying attention. So when her instructor says the word element 3 times, she notices and she thinks about what it means. She looks it up in her Chinese dictionary and she gets a pretty good general idea about what the word means. But she's a little bit nervous about using it because she's not very confident with it yet. So the trouble is, if she doesn't use it, eventually that word will disappear. This is Nadia. Nadia's first language is Arabic. Now, Nadia did exactly the same thing as Alice at first. She looked the word up in her dictionary, but she knows that she has to do more in order to remember words. She knows that she needs to make connections to things that she already knows and not just rely on a translation to remember a word. So Nadia makes a couple of sentences about basketball and about America, and she practices the sentences so that she can use this word element. And in her design class the next week, she asks her teacher a question with this word element. The problem is he doesn't understand, and Nadia gets frustrated. So Nadia has worked pretty hard to learn this word, and she did a lot of things right. The problem was that the sentences she was practicing were not quite correct. Another way of saying this is that she did not encode the word correctly before she studied it. So she was essentially studying and practicing something that wasn't right. And then when she tried to use the new word, the teacher didn't understand. Let's meet Kevin. Kevin is a really good language learner. Now, Kevin did exactly the same things that Nadia did, including making some sentences that weren't quite correct at first and testing out the word in his class. But Kevin didn't give up. He asked his ESL tutor why the design teacher hadn't understood him, and she told him that element doesn't mean part, but it's used to describe an abstract part of something. So Kevin put this information into his working memory. He also looked the word up in a really good English dictionary, which had a lot of good examples of sentences and common patterns for this word. He revised his sentences. He thought about the Harry Potter books that he loved when he was a kid, and he made a sentence: magic is an important element in the Harry Potter series. Stories. Magic is an important element in the Harry Potter stories. He also thought about the X-Files, an old TV show that he likes watching online. There's an element of magic in the X-Files. He found out that element is often followed by of when he looked it up in the dictionary, so he tried to use that pattern there. He checked these sentences with his ESL instructor to make sure they were correct, and then he practiced them. Each time he practiced them, the connections or neural pathways grew stronger, and when the neural pathways are strong, we remember better. Kevin made some other connections as well. He made connections to remember the pronunciation. The word sounds a little bit like elephant. The stress and the vowel sounds are the same, so he connected the word to elephant in order to remember the pronunciation. Kevin also realized that the chemistry class he took when he was in Korea related to this word element. The periodic table of the elements is the list of chemicals. And the line, shape, form, color, value, texture, space list of elements of design was also something that he had encountered before. So he found out that was used the word elements as well. He learned what those were called. He practiced them. And now he has a really strong network of neural pathways to help him remember this word element. He encoded the word really well, and he will be able to use it and remember it, and people should be able to understand him when he uses it now. So in order to learn words the same way that Kevin does, remember you have to first pay attention to the word, find the meaning, Connect the word to your own knowledge and make sentences, and then get feedback so that you encode the exact meaning and patterns of the word correctly. And finally, practice to strengthen the neural pathways so that you can remember them. You don't need to use this technique for every single new word that you hear. It takes a lot of time and effort. And you'll learn the word, but you might not have time to use this on every single new word that you encounter. Remember, your working memory is limited. So choose the important words to focus on. Choose the words that you need to use in your classes and in your daily life. Sometimes you just need to understand a word, and that's enough. You can go back and learn it later. I hope you found these tips helpful and that they help you get closer to learning the 5,000 words that you need for your daily communication in English.